Hi, I'm Paul Darley, and thanks for tuning into our March issue of Inside Darley. It's hard to imagine the devastation that's taken place down in Texas over the last few weeks. And I'll tell you, we at Darley are very proud of that. We were able to be a part of that solution by providing our safe water boxes to hospitals and fire departments and food banks. And boy, we provided almost 200 pallets that equaled about 40,000 gallons of water, if you can imagine. And if your company or fire department is interested in a corporate social responsibility program that, brands your name onto some safe water boxes for emergency relief in the future, reach out to Kevin Sofin at Darley.com. We've attached some information on our program here, but you might find that of interest to you. I'll tell you, we as a business saw very early on this trend toward an increase in natural disasters and technological disasters. And, just as you look at the last 25 years, this increase has really been exponential. And we're going to continue to come out with products like water purification and drones and really products that are helping you as first responders to address these needs. The federal government is recognizing those needs too, and on February 25th, FEMA just released this $1.85 billion emergency preparedness grant program. So check out the attached here, share it with your fire department customers. There's lots of funding available out there. Some of it you're familiar with, like the Fire Act grant and UASC, but I'm sure there's a lot of programs out here that are new that you're not familiar with, so check that out. And I'll tell you, if there's one person who knows about disaster relief and FEMA and emergency response in the industry, I don't think there's probably a higher profile person than Garry Briese, who is our board member. He's been on our board of directors for about 5 years. Prior to that, he served on our defense advisory board. He also served as a FEMA regional director for Region 8, and he served as the executive director of the IEFC for 23 years. So amazing guy. Look, he's going to talk about was Texas preventable, and he talks a little about the 4 essentials of life. And in fact, we've attached here for you a PowerPoint that he used to give in his FEMA speeches relative to the importance of water and power and communications and transportation. So some interesting stuff there. We also talked to him quite a bit about, hey, give us advice for our first responders and company leaders, and what do you think that they should be doing as we start to see an end to this current pandemic and prepare for other pandemics in the future. So some good stuff there. I'll tell you, with that in mind too, I would encourage you to do a little bit of research on Amara's law. And Roy Amara was a Stanford business professor, is a Stanford business professor, and he said, look, we have a tendency, as this chart shows here, we have a tendency to overestimate and overreact to the initial impact of disruptions, whether that's a pandemic or whatever. But then we have a tendency to underestimate the long-term impact. So I think we as a country and we as businesses and fire departments are all going to kind of settle into this new normal as this chart shows. I'll leave you just with one last very positive note. CEO Magazine just released their CEO confidence level for the month of February, and it came out to be the highest confidence level that we've seen in over 2 years. And while they rate on a scale of 1 to 10 current business conditions at a 6.2, they're very optimistic on the future business conditions, rating those at a 7.1. Hopefully you'll stick around and listen to Garry Briese. It's some great stuff. And thanks for tuning into this issue of Inside Darley. If there's anything we can be doing to support you, we hope you'll reach out to us. So excited to have you as part of our Inside Darley video series today, where we are interviewing members of our board of directors and other industry leaders. And boy, you've served on the Darley board of directors for over 5 years. You've been such an amazing contributor. Before that, you served on our defense advisory board. And gosh, you have served our country amazingly as the executive director of the International Association of Fire Chiefs for, over 23 years. You also served as the FEMA director for Region 8 for a number of years. And just really, there's very few people in the industry who have the knowledge base and have the exposure that you've had to really help guide us through this pandemic and all of the issues going on. So as we step back and we look at what took place in Texas over the last couple of weeks, and just how global warming and climate change is really impacting our country and our world. I mean, can you talk a little bit about the specific impact that that's having on our first responder customers, including our firefighting customers as well as our defense customers and just FEMA customers and others who are responding to these disasters?
Thank you, Paul. I think that Texas, to use a cliche, was the perfect storm. There's 4 essentials of life in our world today: communications, transportation, power, and water. And interestingly enough, because of the way this disaster came down in Texas, all 4 of them were impacted. They lost power, they lost water, they lost communications, and they weren't able to move. And that's like the worst case scenario. So that compounds itself with the emergency services. You know, we can't get to the people, they don't have power. We still have a majority of fire stations in the United States who don't have whole building power. So the fire stations are losing power, the police stations are losing power. That's not been a priority for our nation, and that shows up at times like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we start to address those issues, as we as a local fire department levels, at FEMA levels, what would be the key areas that we should be of those 4 areas? Where do you think are some of the major areas of focus that either our country or at a local level we should be focused on to address those?
Well, we need to understand that how people actually respond to things, and our planning scenarios sometimes take our own narrative and put it onto people. So the first thing that people want to do is communicate, right? Every day we do this. Why aren't you answering your cell phone? Why didn't you do the text message? When that goes away, community anxiety goes up, individual anxiety goes up, and community resiliency goes down. So the first thing is communications. We have to be able to communicate with people, tell them what's wrong and what they need to do. And then we have to worry about the power and water. And go ahead.
Well, relative to the communications end, I was just going to say, I don't know, how is the rollout of FirstNet going? I mean, would that have had a substantial impact? Had that been rolled out a little bit earlier? Had this disaster taken place 5 years from now? What impact would FirstNet and other communication, 5G, have had on these type of situations?
So remember, it would help the emergency responders, law enforcement, no question, but it doesn't necessarily help the public. So while we can communicate better, we have to figure out ways to communicate with the public better. So that's the challenge. And yeah, would FirstNet 5 years from now? Yes, that would be a significant difference, but it's also dependent on power, water, transportation too. So.
Absolutely, absolutely. And relative to the United States infrastructure, does that give you pause for concern in those 4 areas long term? And if so, what would be the priority? And as a country, what do you think we should be doing about that, if anything?
Well, I think what Texas experienced, and what anybody who's experienced a long-term power outage and a wide area power outage, is not like I can drive to the next town and get what I need. I can't even, they don't have power either, right? So the first thing is power. There's no question about that. We have to have a resilient power grid and be able to have power, because without power, we don't have communications, we don't have water, and our society quickly goes from 2021 to 1890.
Yeah.
That's
You know,
fast.
it's
Okay.
interesting. We as a business supply a lot of fuel transfer pumps to the Army, Marine Corps, Navy, and you know, one of the lines that we always use that came out of World War II. Look, if you can't get the fuel to the soldiers, everything breaks down, and that was our only source, certainly, of power during those wars. So that certainly hits home with our company over 80 years of serving our military in those different markets. And so in here, it was all compounded by obviously the pandemic and the COVID situation.
Correct.
Where do you see our country going in terms of, as we're starting to come out of this? We like to talk metaphorically that we're at a baseball game. Maybe optimistically, we think we're at the top of the 8th inning right now. And where do you think, what do you think are the key things that we as a country need to make sure we are, either as citizens or first responders or the federal government, really needs to be focused on as we move out of this pandemic and into the next phases? And when is that next phase in your view? When do you think we'll be at a baseball game without a mask on, if you will?
Without a mask on, probably 2022.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be that long. And, you know, we concentrate a lot, and this is what public health officials are telling us. We concentrate a lot on what's happening in the United States, but we're not isolated. Okay, we've got all these variants coming through, mutations, whatever you want to call them, and if we don't control those in the other countries around the world, they will quickly find their way to the United States. While we've been vaccinated against COVID, or we are vaccinating against COVID-19, the original, we still don't have the vaccines for the variants. And the variants are mutating very rapidly overseas where there's no vaccines at all. So
And that's, yeah. And
that
that
could be way ahead of us if we don't get them under control. Mexico, Latin America, South America, all of Africa. I think, wasn't it just yesterday that Ghana got the first vaccines in sub-Saharan Africa?
yeah.
Which is astounding.
Yeah.
If we don't think mutations are going to come from uncontrolled COVID and work their way back to us, we're in that's a pipe dream.
Yeah, yeah. You know, it's interesting, and I don't want to get us sidetracked, but as I have some friends in Africa, we have two offices in Africa, and as I talk to those people, our COVID positivity rates are considerably higher here in the United States than there are in a variety of countries in Africa. And
That is
that's
true.
a conversation for another day, but you're right. As these mutations take place and vaccines take place, almost some type of booster shots or continual, we're going to be in this pandemic for a long time, whether it's, the COVID-19 or other variations of it, would be your view clearly. Is that accurate to say?
Yes, and and the speed of the variations coming, the mutations coming, is going to increase until we get enough vaccines to stabilize in any particular place.
That's great. Well, Garry, we appreciate your time today. Thanks for all you do for our country. I also failed to mention you are the executive director of the Colorado State Fire Chiefs Association. You do a magnificent job there, and thank you for your service to your country and to your service to Darley. Cheers to you.
Thank you very much, and thanks to the viewers.
Thank you.